Okay, welcome to another episode of Talking Away The Taboo. I am Dr. Aimee Baron. I am the founder and executive director here at I Was Supposed to Have a Baby. And tonight we are thrilled to bring on Curt Sechrist. It is, Curt has a really interesting story. He is a Jew by choice, and he's also an adoptive gay dad. And it's just, it's a story that we can't wait to hear. So I'm going to grab him and we're going to get started. Chatting, please drop them in the chat, comment. We will get to as many of them as we can. This episode is going to be recorded. Here he is. Let me figure out. This episode, assuming all the technology works, this episode is going to be recorded, and then we're going to put it up also on our podcast in another couple of weeks. But Curt, say hi. Say
Hey,
hi.
hey, I'm Kurt. Great to be here. Thanks, Amy.
It's so great to have you, and we can't wait to hear your story. So I think I'm just gonna jump right in, and why don't you just give people just the general overview, like give them your bio, and then let's go backwards and then go forwards. Tell people who you are first.
Sure. My name is Curt Sechrist, and I live on the Upper West Side at the moment. I'm in Morningside Heights. I live with my husband Adam,
Hold on,
and
that's not the Upper West Side. That's
okay,
Morningside Heights.
upper
Exactly.
West.
Okay,
Yeah.
just to be clear. Okay, keep going.
I live with my husband Adam, and we have a 3-year-old son Noah, and a nearly 10-year-old, we think, adopted dog called Karma Miranda. And I have this strange accent, but I actually was born here in the States. I was born in Iowa, unbelievably, and then brought up near Manchester in England, where my mum's family are from. My dad was in the Air Force, and I lived in England most of my life. I went to school in London, and at 33, I decided that I wanted to come and sort of reclaim my right to live and work in the States. I have an American passport. I'm an American citizen, and so I decided to make the move. And I've been here ever since, about 10 or 11 years. We had a brief stint in California during the pandemic, and that's actually when our adoption story began. But prior to that, I was living in New York, and I met Adam in 2016 online. And no, wait, hang on. We met in 2014, and then in 2017, the beginning of 2017, I started taking class with him at Central Synagogue in Midtown, and that led to our first trip to Israel together in May of that year, my formal conversion to Judaism in September, and our Jewish wedding in October. So I like to call that my year of Judaism.
It's amazing.
And we were making a life together here with that with our community and with my new Jewish identity. We were sort of really living in that and developing it when the pandemic started, and at which point my husband was offered a job opportunity in San Francisco. We kind of felt like we didn't have too much to stay in New York for at that time. We loved New York and we loved our friends, but we were ready for kind of an adventure and for him to take an opportunity. We stayed for nearly 2 years, and then we came back to New York at the beginning of 2022, and now it's New York or nowhere, I like to say.
I look as a New Jerseyan by birth, but having lived in New York since college, I'm a person who agrees with you on that. So I yes. Okay, I want to go back and sort of like dig a little bit deeper into some of those pieces because I think that'll help to give everyone a sense of a more of an in-depth sense of who you are and the choices that you've made in your life. So if we can go back, can you talk about first of all just your identity in general? When did you know that you were gay? And sort of when did that like did you always know, or was it something that you figured out later on? Like when did that piece happen?
Yeah, I feel like I have had like a lot of duality in my life. Like I grew up with, American citizenship, but living in England, and I sort of started to realize I was gay around 12. And so then, I lived the duality of a closeted gay life for about another 10 years. I didn't come out until I was 22. And now I'm in the States, and again, I feel like there's a duality from being, somebody with an English accent, sort of perceived as being somebody that, has a green card or doesn't have the opportunity to be here, like that, with my American kind of identity as well. And I feel like I've had quite a lot of duality in my life, but that
Yeah.
definitely felt strong. I felt that strongly when I was a teenager, and I was starting to realize I was gay. I actually remember the very first moment I realized myself. It was a Sunday afternoon, and my mom used to love watching kind of old Hollywood movies, and we were watching Pillow Talk with Doris Day and Rock
Okay.
Hudson, ironically.
Okay.
And there's a scene where they're talking to each other, and he's in the bathtub, and I remember like thinking about him for a long time afterwards, and thinking that's strange, that's different, that's new. And Rock Hudson remains like one of my top all time
Funny.
movie crushes. Like I so love that kind of like iconic Hollywood leading man thing. Um, Even though I married a Jewish guy from the Midwest and from Kansas, who's nothing like Rock Hudson, but and so I really remember that moment. And then I think, yeah, it was, I think, as many closeted young gay people's stories are, it was really difficult. I was lucky that my family didn't, like reject me wholeheartedly. My mum had a really difficult time. I'm from a single parent family, so it was just my mum. And she had a really hard time with it initially. We didn't talk for a wee while. And then she eventually came round, and we went for like a drink together, and we talked about it. I told her on the eve of my 22nd birthday, and so that was December, and by the following springtime we were talking again. And I remember her saying to me, "I just don't want you to die alone." That was her big
Wow.
concern. And I think
Wow.
for her it was hard to imagine that I would ever find somebody that I could have a life with and live a life with. And it was much harder for her to imagine that I would ever have a family. And I think for myself too, it was really hard to think about that piece. My husband and I talk all the time about not having any examples of queer parenting or family building when we were growing up. Like we had the show like Queer as Folk, which was like not about family raising or family building. And then eventually we moved into like having things like Will and Grace, which was
Yeah.
like landmark and huge to see gay people kind of, have agency. But again, not until I guess later in that show's life was it about family building. And so we
Right.
didn't think it was a thing. And when Adam and I met the very first day we went on, it was one of the very first things we talked about was that we both wanted to have kids at some point. And we both really felt a strong thing about doing a better job than our fathers had. Adam's father's very distant, is not emotionally available to him, and they've had a turbulent life. I don't think he'd mind me sharing that. I think he's pretty vocal about that. And my dad left when I was 4, so I've never known him. He had another family. And so we both felt very strong drives to be fathers ourselves, I think for those reasons. And we also had to make sure that we were doing it for the right reasons. We weren't just trying to, make amends for something that we had no
Right.
control of in our life.
Right. Did your mother ever express, like, was it ever, I don't want you to die alone, and I'm also worried that I'm not going to have grandchildren? Like, was it both, or was it just more focus on you? And are you an only child?
No, I have an older sister
Okay.
who didn't have kids at the time. She has one now, and that came maybe a couple of years after I came out. I don't think she even thought about grandkids. I don't think it was like in the realm of possibility that she thought that I would be able to have a family. Which I think, fair enough. Like she didn't understand, as I didn't at the time either, like what the pathways to
Right.
that would be. And I also think that's not only time, but it's also the nature of where we live. Like England has, or at least did when I lived there, has very different family building modalities for gay people than I think the United States does. And so I think there were no examples of it, and it wasn't even something that she could think about at that point. She was more just about like her son, who she felt the shock of realizing, the biggest thing about me, she didn't have any clue. I don't know how that's possible. She had no
Yeah.
clue that I was
Yeah.
gay when I'm watching Doris Day musicals with her on a Sunday afternoon. But she didn't know. She was completely taken aback by it. And so I think that like the hurt she felt, and it wasn't like, that she was of who I was. It was that she didn't know. That was what most hurt her. And so I think she really had to work through that herself before, and then so that me having a kid was just never even on her mind.
And can you talk a little bit about it just because you brought it up? Like what the differences are between England, you said like the opportunities are not available or were not
Yeah.
available or you didn't have those role models versus what there might have been or what there is now here.
Yeah, so far, I mean, and I don't know for sure, but I remember when I was in my mid-20s, there was a landmark couple in the UK who had had a family through IVF surrogacy, two gay men, and their case was like they were very, very affluent. They had the money to be able to do it, and their case, they were very well known for having done this, but they were literally the first that were aware they were in the public eye. And and so I don't know where laws stand now.
Yep.
I hope they've moved forward a lot in the last 15 years or so,
Yep.
15 or 20 years. But at the time I remember thinking like, oh, that's just only for the super rich. And also they got in all this tabloid press coverage that their case was like, troll there was a lot of dirt was pulled up on them, and it was like such a novel thing. And so I didn't really even think about it seriously until I got to the States. And my dream was always like, I'm going to have an apartment in Manhattan. And, I have an acting background. I'm going to be a successful actor in New York, and I'm going to meet the man I'm going to marry. And eventually we'll have a kid somehow. And I don't think I even knew like how we would do it. And when Adam and I really started getting serious and we started talking about it, we very quickly were on a consensus that IVF and surrogacy was not going to be the route that we wanted to take. We knew
Why?
where
Why?
I don't know. I think we both just felt really strongly compelled to adopt. Like there was like this strong sense of moral or morality or conscious about it. Like that we thought there were so many instances of kids needing a place and kids needing a family. We just wanted to step forward and be that family. And we neither of us felt a real strong drive that biologically we had to be a part of the child's DNA. That wasn't a thing either.
Yep.
I also don't know how we would have even started to talk about that and how we would have made a decision about that, like whose DNA it would have
Right.
been, or but also I think it was a cost thing as well. I think we were sort of in the back of our mind thinking like that would be the more expensive route. Little did we know how expensive adoption would eventually be. But I think certainly from a sense of morality and social conscience and just what felt right for us, it was always adoption.
Okay. Before we sort of get further down that path, can you talk about the Judaism in your life and when that like was that something that you had considered even before you met Adam or it was as you were meeting Adam and it was important to him like I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and also hear what did your mother say about that, what did your sister say about it, and I'm even going to push you forward. I'm going to ask you like 15 questions in this one question, okay, because I have it right. And did you think at the time, becoming a Jew has never been something that's been easy, and we're a religion that is constantly in the minority, constantly, and in today's day and age, how much more so. So I'm just curious, sort of, at all of these different points, where your head was at, and what did the people around you think?
Yeah. Well, so I grew up in Manchester in the northwest of England, which is a place where Jewish people are thriving and have thrived, and it was one of the epicenters of Jewish, like of the diaspora in England. I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea. Apart from maybe there was some Jewishness in my family that wasn't really talked about because we were so close to Manchester, and my family were, on my mom's side at least, were like Irish immigrants, and then there was like a rumor that there may be some sort of Jewish immigration that had like landed in Manchester and come into the family at some point, but it wasn't talked about. So I was brought up, in a very working class family on like in a working class town near Manchester, with socialism as like a driving force and like the class system and Church of England loosely. I went to a school that was non-denominational for the most part, but we would do Christmas and Easter, and I didn't really know there was much different. I think there was one Jewish person in my school because he was absent on certain days that I now know are the high holidays.
Got it.
And we
Okay.
were always like, "Where's Ben? Where's Ben?" And it's like, "Oh, he's got time off because of his religion today." And I was like, "What religion?" So I was completely ignorant about it. Then I moved to London when I'm 18, and my world opens up hugely, but still not like massive. I knew there was pockets of Judaism in London, and eventually I go to the drama school that I went to in London for 3 years. I started there in 2001, and there's a girl in my class called Esther Shanson, and she's Jewish, and I'm like, oh, and she's this beautiful, statuesque, tall, like gorgeous, dark-haired girl from North London, and she's from a Jewish family, and we did a play in our third year that was set in a Jewish ghetto, and slowly, slowly, I started to learn more and more. But then again, like I sort of was like, okay, well, Jews live in Manor House or like Hendon or whatever in
Yeah.
London, and they're very orthodox. And funny stories about walking down the street when my friends live nearby, and then being asked to come in and press the elevator button. But like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
funny
Yeah.
like kind of orthodox communities like living in a great way in their traditional way, but me having no concept of what that was. And then, I moved to New York and I like, what is this Jewish thing? Because it's everywhere in New York. It's delis and it's like synagogue and it's like culture and people like, and I was like, what is it? What's going on? And so like my interest was like piqued in a new way than it ever had been before. And then I meet Adam in, around Thanksgiving
Wait,
time, and he
how
gets
did you meet Adam? I know I'm asking you a question upon a question, but you have
boringly
to. Okay.
online. We swiped on each other on Tinder. We
Okay.
were both just on there at the right time
Okay.
after, difficult breakups or whatever else. We were like, we'll give it one more go, and it happened to be that
Amazing.
we were ready.
Okay.
And that was around Thanksgiving. So when we get to the Christmas time, I started asking him what he wants for Christmas. I was like, I've always bought my partner, my boyfriend, whatever, like I've always bought them a Christmas present. Like, what do you want? He's like, well, I don't really do Christmas. And I was like, tell me more. And so he told me more about Hanukkah, and so I bought him 8 little presents that year. And then the following year, we started doing more and more stuff together. We would do like Shabbat candles. We started live streaming some services from synagogue. We held a Seder for some of our friends in our apartment, and I was just like, okay, you just deal with it, like cook everything, and like tell me what to do, and I'll just sit there. And I was just like trying to learn more. And then I think after maybe a year or so of that of just sort of us doing a bit of a toe dip, I turned to him and said, "What would you think if I said I wanted to explore this a little bit more?" And he said, "I think that would be really cool. Like we should do that together." And so we were starting to live stream services from Central Synagogue in Midtown Manhattan, and they happened to be starting in a few months a new semester of Intro to Judaism class, and we took that class together for about 6 months. And very early on in that process, I knew that it was for me. It just felt right. We went to Israel in that time with the organization that I now work for, ironically, Honeymoon Israel. Again, that felt like a further piece of this new identity. It felt again like I was like connected to this history and this lineage and this tradition. It just felt like I was somewhere that I belonged. And I did have to, look inward and ask myself, am I ready to be part of another minority and to face perhaps further persecution for who I'm choosing to be? And the wonderful rabbi who runs the Center for Exploring Judaism now at Central, Rabbi Lisa Rubin, who is such a mentor and guide for me, and she said, be sure we don't have it easy. We haven't had it easy historically, and it's important for you to be ready to hitch your wagon. And I really was. And here I am 7 years later, and now I work as a Jewish professional, and it's part of my job now on a daily basis is to try and make Judaism and Jewishness welcoming for other people, and help them hopefully feel as home in it as I have always done, as I have always been made to feel. And I know that that's complicated, but that's what I'm hoping to strive for and hoping to build through my work and through like my belonging to this thing is like I want to help others find it, and maybe feel a little bit like I do.
Uh, Look, I mean, it's an incredibly inspiring story. I mean, I many people know this. It's not a secret. I mean, I was born Jewish, but I did not grow up religious, and so for me, I kind of from the time I was very young, I knew that I wanted to learn more and probably wanted to take on more as I was getting older, and I did, and so here I am now. But there is this
I love it.
There is this incredible power of knowing that you're part of something that's been around for thousands of years, and that people that obviously the religion in pieces, there are pieces that look very different, but there are so many core pieces that have been exactly the same, and just the history there is something very powerful. So I so much of what you said I very much relate to. I'm just curious, just that one sort of last point, what did your mother say?
Yeah,
Because this
she
is then like the next, like, the next thing that you're saying. And by the way,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, what had happened in between me leaving, in between me coming out and leaving and becoming Jewish, I left home. I left, I moved out of home when I was 18 and went to London, and then I had to tell her I was moving to the States permanently. And she was like, okay, I kind of figured that that was going to happen at some point. You've always talked about New York and it being part of your story. But I said to her, I'm going to change my name. I'm going to choose a stage name that's easier for me to like maybe say with an English accent when I'm in the States. And so, she took that far worse than me coming out, becoming Jewish, getting like that was the worst possible news to her, was that I was going to change my
Wait,
name.
what was your name? What was your name?
I started as Curtis Jordan. That was my name at birth, and then
Okay.
I just shortened it. I was like I want to be Kurt, and I was like and Kurt Jordan didn't feel right, so I was like I'm gonna choose like a name that's in my family. I was like James. I'm gonna be Kurt James. So when I first moved to the States, I was Kurt James, and my mum hated that, hated it.
Wow.
She really couldn't get past that. And then I took my husband's name when we got married, so I'm now legally Curtis Sechrist, but I still prefer Kurt just because it's English accent, American accent. It's just easier to get through the day.
Yeah.
So then when I told her I was going to be Jewish, she was like, "Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Tell me more." Like she was like me, like 25 years ago, whatever. She didn't know too much, and so I said, "Well, I started explaining to her about holidays as they came up, or we're going to do this. We're not, I'm not going to celebrate Christmas anymore. I'm going to do this," and she wanted to know more, and then I mentioned I was converted in September, and then we were married in October of that same year. And she came over for the wedding. We got married in the Hamptons, and she came over and stayed in Manhattan for a day or two beforehand. And we were having an aliyah at synagogue. We were invited up to the front to speak in front of the community and to be given a blessing on the Shabbat before our wedding, which was gorgeous. And my mum came to synagogue that night, and my husband and I went up to the bima at the front, and the community blessed us. And then I walked back down the aisle, and my mum stood up, and she threw her arms around my neck, and she like buried her face into me, and she held me like that for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And she
Wow.
was crying, and I think she was so overwhelmed by the sense of love and welcoming that that community was showing Adam and I, and that she was just beginning to be invited into. And so I think that moment, being in synagogue on Shabbat and hearing the community bless us in Hebrew, explained more to her about what Judaism and Jewishness is than I could ever have done through like explaining, you know,
Wow.
Yom Kippur or whatever. So
Right.
and
Right.
and she's gorgeous. Like now, her and her partner, they like they have been over and done Shabbat with us, and they stand and like sort of bow their heads when we do the blessings, and they they're like really they're really respectful of it and curious, and have been so welcoming about it.
Wow. And you said something about how there might have been something in your past that might have been Jewish, but you weren't sure. Was that ever discovered or?
I don't think
Yeah.
so. I think like, it's that difficult thing about generations passing to generations,
Yeah.
and information doesn't get held, like I don't know. I wish maybe one day I'll be inclined to go back and
Yeah.
do a 23andMe or some such. But I also like
Yeah.
that Judaism is something that I chose, and I have to really like build that identity for myself, and I have to like live in it comfortably without anything to sort of any record of it. Like I feel
Yeah.
like that's my journey with it.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I'm yeah, it's really an incredible story. But let's now go back, and so go back to this idea of, the two of you are now together, and you already from the beginning were talking about, okay, we're going to adopt. We're not going to do surrogacy. We're not going to figure out whose sperm or whatever it is. We're going to adopt. And maybe it was a financial decision, maybe whatever it was, but the moral, ethical, like we want to contribute to the people in the world who don't have parents or are coming from circumstances that are, you know, don't allow them to keep their whatever the circumstances are, that these individuals need parents. So talk to us about what happened next. Like what what was that journey like?
Yeah. So the key thing was that we moved to California because I think I mentioned before about like the differing laws between England and America, and there are very differing laws on adoption, state to state. And we'd always, when we looked into it kind of very lightly in New York, we had found out that you'd have to have, at least at the time, you had to have a two-bedroom apartment because you had to have a room ready for a baby if you were going to
Okay.
sign up and be on an adoption wait list. And I don't know about you, but I don't know many New Yorkers in their like early 30s who can afford to pay for a second bedroom if they're not ever going to use it. And so, Adam and I were not in a position at the time to get a two-bedroom place. So we sort of just paused on it. We just kind of put it to one side. And, truth be told, I wasn't sure we'd ever be able to afford it. We were like, doing the New York thing, the two of us. And like I said, I was an actor, like jobbing actor from job to job and trying to make ends meet in the middle. And Adam was doing well, but like we didn't have a lot of disposable income. I was like, I don't think this is going to be part of our story if we stay in Manhattan.
And can you just give people an idea? Because I think people just really don't know. Like, what was the number that was being thrown at you in terms of like, how much would it possibly cost? Like, legal fees, I'm guessing the agencies or whomever, like, I don't even know if you could maybe share just a bit more of the process of who did you
Yeah.
have to discuss, and where did you
Yeah.
have to go, etc.
Well, I don't. That's part of the problem is I don't think we knew. We didn't really have the dollar amount. We just knew that we couldn't afford to pay for a two-bedroom apartment,
Yeah.
let alone then have 30,000 dollars at least
Yeah.
seed money to start the process. To then also, wait. Like adoption is famously a process and a long wait traditionally, and so we just were like, that's just money that we can't think of right now. But moving to California, we luckily had friends that lived in San Francisco who had adopted and twice. And so we had an amazing like phone a friend. We were just like, hey, just tell us like which agency did you use? We also could ask them those awkward questions like how much was it? Like how much and how did you pay for it? And they were like, well, like you can pay it out over time. It's not all out at once. And here's the agency that we use, and they're having an info session. Why don't you guys just go to the info session and ask the questions that you have and find out more? And so my Adam loves to tell the story. We're standing in the line, the socially distanced line outside of Trader Joe's in Oakland, in California, and he signs us up for this info session the following week. We log on, we get to ask some more awkward questions. The amazing person who runs the agency, she's very approachable, she's very personable, and we're on like a Zoom screen with lots of other couples, and we notice there's a few other same-sex couples, and then she says anybody that wants to sign up with us and be on the list after this info session, you'll get an automatic discount from like the fee for the agency. And so we were like, well, let's just see. So we reach out and they say, yeah, actually, we have an opening right now for a couple that fits your profile if you want to. And so we just went for it. We were just like,
Wow.
okay, I guess we'll just like we'll just start. We'll just start the process. We're gonna be, and we'd already found out at that point that the national average wait is 2 years before
Mhm.
a placement. So we were like, it's 2 years. Let's just start. Long story short, we match with our son's birth mother 2 months after
Oh
we
my
went live.
goodness.
After we went live on their website, she actually found us much sooner than that, like literally a weeks after we were on the website.
Wow.
They just did a beautiful, careful job of keeping us in our own corners until it was a little bit further on in her pregnancy, because traditionally, again, it's there's a bit more safety, and we'll talk maybe a little bit about what I mean by that. But like, if you can wait until around the 7 month mark in a birth mother's pregnancy, but we started the process, and it's an invasive, difficult, demanding, emotional process. Like having somebody, a team of people, assess whether you are fit to be a parent. It's something that straight people do not really traditionally have to go through. But we had to jump through many hoops to say, like, are we sound of mind enough to be parents? Are we financially fit to have to support a kid? All of these things, and I will say the agency we work with are called Adoption Connection in San Francisco Bay Area and are just incredible. They're such wonderful people. We work with their social workers. Nevertheless, it's still a very difficult thing to just sit with somebody on a Zoom and say like, yeah, this is how I was parented. This is how I intend to parent, and sort of and go through a lengthy period of seeing what your capacity to be a parent is. We did it all. We went through it all, and we were very clear we wanted to do an open adoption, and about 80% of adoptions today in the US are open.
Explain what
But people,
that means. Explain what that
yeah,
means.
closed adoption is where the adoptee has no, doesn't have to see the birth certificates. They're sealed and are not there. They can't access them until they're 21 or 18 or whatever the rule happens to be. And so there's no contact between birth parents and adopting adoptive parents. It's a very separate thing. And in an open adoption, the intention is that the adoptee knows their full identity as much as possible, and that you make a future contact agreement with the birth parents if that's what they wish, so that you are really clear as adoptive parents and them as birth parents how they can be in each other's lives, with the full hope and intention that with science, history, research has proven that adoptees are usually much more grounded in their life if they have the fullness of their story. And so that from the very beginning is seen as, in an open adoption, is seen as a really key piece. And so Adam and I really knew that that's what we wanted to do. We really wanted to have a relationship with our baby's birth parents, whoever they might be. That was really what we hoped. And a lot of the training that we got when we were with the agency was about how that would go, but potentially what the risk for us would be, because again, depending on the state that you adopt in, will depend a little bit on when a birth parent signs away their rights to parent. And it's a very difficult dance between being placed with a baby, the baby being with a birth mother, the baby being born, and then you as adopted parents knowing legally, safely that the baby is
Right.
yours. And so that varies from state to state and situation to situation. But we really were okay with that. We knew that that was going to be a part of this. And then we wanted to be able to do that and move past it into a thing where our son or daughter, or whatever we had, would have a relationship with their birth parents as they grew older.
And you were talking about some of the safety before waiting until 7 months. Is that what you're talking about? And like, or uh, when you say
Yeah.
safety, like what exactly do you mean?
I mean, I'm really talking about the adoptive parent safety, because so much is put at risk financially and emotionally when you choose to adopt. And we were very our agency always explained, and we were big advocates for the fact that the birth mother would remain with the right to parent until a certain point, and we really thought that was an important piece. That there was no attempt to sort of blindside them and say and try and get the baby to be ours as soon as possible. We knew that they were going to lift her up and give her as long as possible to choose to parent, but that also means that you put yourself as an adoptive parent in a very vulnerable situation. And so if they wait until the pregnancy is 7 months, it means that they're further along in their decision to place the child for
Uh-huh.
adoption. They've been through a period of understanding what that's going to involve. They've started to speak with social workers. They've started to work with the agency potentially to think through what the pieces of that are going to be, as opposed to you as adopted parents matching with a birth mother early in the pregnancy and her thinking it's what she wants to do, and you starting to support her financially and pay the fees and do the legalities of it and start to get your heart set on this for the situation not to go your way. And so they're very careful, and it's always done with a lot of humanity. The agency we worked with, especially, to make sure that the birth mother always feels like she retains the option to parent. And again, that the period for which that happens after a child is born varies situation to situation.
And did you find, I guess, did you know going into this process that you only wanted to have to adopt a baby? Like, was there ever a consideration that you might want to adopt an older child?
Yeah, I really wanted to. I really thought like it's harder to place older children with adoptive parents, and so my heart was pulled more to try and help there. And Adam and you have to look at who you are in a very real way when you choose to adopt. I think whenever you build a family, you have to look at yourself very clearly in the
Yeah.
mirror and know who you are. You can't hide from yourself. And to Adam's credit, he said, "Look, I know it's really important that I have an infant. I have a baby. I'm there. We're there from as close to birth as we can possibly be, so that I can bond with them." And he said maybe if we have a second, we think about doing an older child or a foster to adopt situation. But this first one, he was like, I just want to feel like the baby's is ours from the beginning. And so I was like, okay. And so we said that we wanted to we wanted a baby, and we also said we were available for an immediate placement, which we kind of thought we would get, which is where the agency calls you and says there's a baby being born. The birth mothers decided they can't parent, and you have to get to the hospital like immediately. We
Right.
kind of thought that would be our story. What ended up happening was, like I said, our son's birth mother found us, and they let us know a couple of months after we went live. And she was from Seattle. Our profile picture had us at Pike Place Market, and she just immediately made an association with that photo. And when she started looking through our profile, she saw that we were a same-sex male couple. I was an actor. We both loved Disney. All of these things really resonated for her. She's an actress. Her dad had loved Mickey Mouse and Disney and stuff, and so she just immediately was like, "These are the guys for me." And she was very keen to meet us, and the agency sort of held her back a little bit and carefully allowed us to meet together, and and she was always very sure about it being us.
And I don't know, in terms of her own privacy, and I mean, I know the end of the story already, but can you share a little bit more about her, why you were excited about her, what your relationship turned out like, why she decided to give her baby up for adoption?
She um she's an incredible person. She really was an incredible person. She was a drag artist. She was a drag queen. Not often you find a woman who's a drag queen and not a drag queen. She was a drag queen in Seattle, an actor, a dancer, was like a really beautiful person. And she identified as queer. She was married, and her husband is not our son's birth father, but she had a lot of difficulty with addiction, and I really want to try and be careful
Yeah,
and
yeah,
protect her story as much
yeah.
as possible.
That's why.
But she yeah, but so she knew that she wasn't going to be able to parent. She was too sick. She had too much on her plate to be able to parent. And when she found out she was pregnant, she contemplated the termination. She told us, and then she was walking around the downtown area, and she suddenly realized that there was an opportunity that she could give to a same-sex couple, to a queer couple,
Wow.
and that was really important to her, I think, because she was queer herself, and she was like, I can give two guys a baby. And I think that was like so kind of amazing to her. And that continued to be the thing that guided her. I think she, definitely had moments where she would have loved to have parented. Like I think if she had been in a different place in her life and things had worked out differently, she would have been an incredible mom. And I think she really saw a role for herself with us as well. That was part of it. Was like we're both the dad, that she could still be mom. And like she was really sick. She was really, really sick. She'd struggled with eating disorders and addiction most of her life, and unfortunately it took her life about a year after Noah was born. Just over a year after Noah was born, we got a message from her husband, we remained close with her and him in that time as much as possible, and he told us that unfortunately she had passed. And it's a horribly tragic loss for her and her husband and her life. She had a lot of loss in her life, her family, and now there's a new level of loss for us and our son. Selfishly, like that we don't get to be the adopted parents we always wanted to be. That we don't get to can have that relationship for him with her. It's now down to us, with hopefully her family and close friends like are helping us keep her story alive, so that my son can know who she was, and know her story and know what an incredible thing it was that she did. And yeah, I really wish that she was still on the other end of the phone or a Zoom, and we were arranging the next time we were going to see her, and she'd get to see my son and just like see this incredible person. that he's growing into.
I you and I had spoken about this beforehand, and but it's still hearing it now is just it's awful. It's awful. I mean, I don't think there's really anything more to say, just that it's exactly what you shared in that she made this incredible decision for her child, knowing that she was not able to care for him in the way that someone else could. And but anytime, someone leaves this world too early, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. We'll always be so incredibly grateful for what she did, and I hope that she, I think we brought something into her life. I don't think that's too much to say that I think she loved like seeing herself through our eyes as this incredible person that wasn't just addiction and struggles. She was in a, we looked at her with so much love and respect and just like amazement at what she was doing. And I think she loved being that person for that time. And I hope that, that gave her something in the last year or so of her life to be able to do that. But I think, yeah, what she did was, and what women do in this situation is truly incredible. And part of the reason I'm here talking with you, Amy, and part of the reason Adam and I will always tell this story is for two reasons that I don't think we know enough about it. Like we don't know it as a viable family building option. We don't understand enough about why certain people, certain women are in a position where they're not able to parent, and what the process is involved, and actually that it can be like it can be a way that they can still have a connection to an adoptee, and to like have that in their life, even though it feels like, and of course they are giving away of something, giving up of something, or placing something, is so what we tend to say in adoption is that they place their baby, but it's a loss. But that adoption, and open adoption especially, is a way that that connection can stay when it feels like there's no other way out, there's no alternative. So we tell the story to try and throw light on adoption, because we didn't know and people don't know, and especially for same-sex couples, that it is a possibility, at least if you're wanting to do it, that we can be amazing adoptive parents, and we can help tell these people's stories to these kids, and raise them in incredible ways. And also for our son, we're doing it for our son, who will have to explain his identity as an adoptive indigenous Jew by choice with two dads. He's going to have to explain the many boxes he checks on a form for the rest of his life. And so we always step up and tell our story collectively in order to help and support him, because he's got a complex identity, and we want to like be the example of him, of how he can help explain that to the world.
it's absolutely incredible. It's absolutely incredible. When did you was there, did he have a circumcision? Was there, like, did he have to be converted? Like, can you talk a little bit about that? I'm curious about that
Yeah.
piece of it.
Yeah, it gets complicated. His birth mother was not Jewish, but when we told her that we were and we wanted to raise him Jewishly, she was like, "Amazing! I dated a rabbi for 5 years. I love it." So she's like, she said it before we did. She's like, "I'm totally on board with the Jewish thing, by the way." And we're like, "Amazing!" And so we chose his he has a Hebrew name as his first name, and then we honored her father with his middle name. We asked if we could name him after her dad, which
Wow.
just she was just overwhelmed by, and um and 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 yes, we had a bris. He's circumcised, and it was deep COVID, so we just had a few relatives over to our place wearing masks. But the great thing about my job is that I know many rabbis and moils, and so we like got connected with somebody to do the bris, and we are like, helping him live as Jewishly as we do. He gets his PJ library books, and we make challah bread together, and we light Shabbat candles, and he can sing Shabbat Shalom already, like, before he was 3. And technically, yeah, he will at some point, if maybe we decide for him, or maybe he decides himself at that point, he will need to be in the mikvah and the ritual bath, and his Jewish identity will need to be formalized in some way. But we haven't done it yet, because I think, I don't know, there's something for me about like wanting him to know. The going in the mikvah for me was like incredible. It was one of the most special moments of my life. and I want to maybe help him be a bit older, and so that he can understand what that is. But also, like, we've got to be prepared. I say this often, like, he might not Judaism might not be his thing, and I'm like, well, okay. Like, like I said, he has many other identities that I want to try and honor and make space for. And so if he ultimately decides Judaism or Jewishness is not his thing, we gotta talk about that, and I gotta leave room for that as well. So
I, look, it's so interesting. I've had conversations with other parents of children who are adopted, and it is, it is so beautiful to watch how parents bring in children's original culture, their nationality, their race, whatever it is, into their own lives because, they don't want to erase the past. They want to bring all of those pieces together and let the child grow up in this beautiful, like, melting pot of a situation, which I think is just it's so powerful. I mean, it's the story of America, right? It's the
right.
story of like the big melting pot of bringing people together, all different kinds of race, religion, etc. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so beautiful.
I work, as I mentioned, I work in Jewish community building, and the amount of times I meet folks who, are coming and saying like, "Hey, I don't really know what my Jewishness is," there's such a stark difference between folks who are allowed to find it themselves at a certain point in their life, as opposed to feeling like it's kind of thrust upon them, or it's too scaffolded. And so yeah, I think that's really, it's going to be very important as he gets older, and that he can embrace, all aspects of his identity, and also, like, hopefully he sees in me as somebody who chose it, an example of like ways to make it meaningful and ways to have agency within that choice as well. But like I said, I'm fully ready for him to turn around and be like, it's not for me. This is my thing.
Yeah.
And like, I'd be a hypocrite if I was like, well, you've got to be Jewish because we're Jewish.
Right, right. Look, I mean, as a parent myself, and you're a parent also. I mean, the best parents are the ones that listen to their kids, right? And you have to, every child needs to be parent differently, but we can't force our ideals on them. We have to show them the beauty of why we think this is important and why it's powerful and meaningful for us. And then we hope that it gets translated down, but you can't force
Right,
anything on anyone. Like, that's just not the way it
right.
works. It's not the way it works. Okay, so just to close here, I mean, you've already shared. I mean, why did you want to do this? We already know that you know, it's deeply important to you and Adam to share the story so that you can be role models for people, anyone in the Jewish community who are considering adoption or considering any kind of family building story, and just to show them that this is possible. I'll end with this last question of, you know, when you see people coming to you now, I mean, through Honeymoon Israel, and you see lots and lots of these kinds of people who are coming from all corners of the world and all different pockets of Judaism and exploring and not, um, how do how do you tell your story? How do, like, I think my guess is when people just meet you, they probably make lots of assumptions that, you've probably been here for a long time. Like, how do you share it with them? How do you share it with them? What are their reactions? And what do you want to impart to this next generation of people who are really thinking about, like, am I going to be able to build a family? Might not have that happen for me. What does it look like? How can I, like, what do you impart to them?
Yeah. I mean,
Sorry, I mean,
no,
I just
yeah,
threw a lot at you, so sorry about that.
they're big questions. Like, if you feel that drive to have a family, as I think Adam and I did, despite the fact that we didn't have examples of it growing up, and despite the fact we had no clue what the pathway for us to do that as a same-sex couple living in Manhattan would be, we felt the drive. We felt that had to be a part of our story at some point. And I will share that when we matched with my son's birth mother, she shared a picture of his sonogram with us very quickly, shockingly, and Adam slept with that picture every single night,
Wow.
because already to him, as much as you try and protect yourself in this process, already to him, he was our son, he was our baby, and he just, like, he held on to that so tightly, and I think that just speaks to how much his whole being was about having a family. And the same for me as well. We just knew that we wanted to have a child together. And so I think if that is, that drive compels you, you need a lot of support. We said it in our adoption process, it takes a village. We meant, like they talk about the triptych in adoption, like the birth parents, the adopted parents, and the adoptee, and that the three of you, that triangle is working together to try and support each other. And so I think you need a lot of support if you, especially if you're building your family unconventionally and non-traditionally. Access to information. Financially, it's a huge toll. It's a huge toll. The outgoing on an adoption set us back for years. And of course, it was money that we wanted to spend, but we had no idea the complexity of our son's adoption case, and that it would actually take much more money than we'd initially thought. And so I think there's a huge toll financially. There's a huge toll emotionally when you're going through this process. I mentioned like the way that you're examined. I think when you're choosing to build your family again unconventionally or non-traditionally, you're having to like examine things in a different way. And I think you need your relationship can be put under a lot of strain as well within that, as you both continue to remember why you're in it and when things get really hard. And we've had many friends who've been on fertility journeys and family building journeys themselves, and we've all watched each other, like go through those moments, those really difficult moments. And so I think you need a lot of folks in your corner. And I think like that, like this, like, Aimee, I think what you're doing with I Was Supposed to Have a Baby is in fact one of the most important things, which is throwing light on these different pathways, giving voice to it, creating safer spaces for folks to be able to share, especially about the difficult things. There are losses. If I'm hearing about gay couples at the moment that are like, well, we spent all our money and it didn't work out
Right.
on IVF and surrogacy, and that was our path, and that's closed to us now, and that's the end of their family building journey. And I'm like, that the pain that must encompass. I think you need spaces, you need forums, and you need community where you can talk about this in order to not just hold on to it yourself.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's what we try to do for everyone in the Jewish community. It is like we all know, right? That when we talk about it, it's not that it makes the problem go away, but it feels a little bit lighter knowing that you're not carrying it by yourself. I always say that, I my there are beautiful, incredible, wonderful Jewish fertility organizations and regular fertility organizations, and their goal, their mission is to give people babies. They have these signs like on their wall and all over their websites, and success for them is a baby. And for us, success is not a baby. It would be beautiful if everyone would have a baby, but success for us is community. Success for us is that people just feel that they're not alone in this process, wherever the process ends. So thank you. Thank you. We're all trying. We're all
Yeah.
trying. Curt, where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm at Curt Jams. That's my older name, Curt James without the E, on
Okay,
Instagram. You
fine. Now it
see?
all makes sense.
Yeah. And if you are, if you're looking for any sort of resources like this Jewishly, if you're a couple that is like family building or anything about finding your Jewish life here in New York, as Aimee mentioned, I work for this organization called Honeymoon Israel. We work with interfaith couples, couples who are both born Jewish, and it's like you said, it's not an easy time to be Jewish or to be part of the Jewish community right now. And at Honeymoon Israel, we're trying to create spaces that are for folks from all different backgrounds doing Jewish, whatever way feels right for them. So you can find that at honeymoonisrael.org, or you can use my real legal name, Curtis.Sechrist, at honeymoonisrael.org.
We will uh we'll link all of those in the show notes afterwards. But Curt, not Curtis, Curt, thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing Adam's story, for both of your stories. And may you just continue to be incredible parents to this amazing, wonderful child. I mean, it's a gift. It's a tremendous gift.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, thank you for the time and the space to be able to share his and our story.
You're welcome. It is my deep pleasure. All right, everybody, have a wonderful night. We'll be back at some point this week, next week, with more stories. Good night, everybody.